Welcome to the Clarity Digital Pod. I'm your host, Al Sefati. In this episode, I talk with Chris Selland, an experienced CMO and former CEO of multiple B2B companies. We discuss the CEO and CMO relationship, sales and marketing friction, and how artificial intelligence is shaping leadership. Let's get started. All right. Hi, Chris. How you doing today? Happy Friday.
Thanks, Al. Happy Friday to you, too. We're looking forward to the long holiday weekend just ahead of us.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Monday's a holiday. You don't mind introducing yourself for our audience? That would be wonderful.
Sure. So my name's Chris Selland. I'm based in the Boston area, or in New England at least. I am currently the CMO of a B2B enterprise software company called Ecumena. And I'm also a part-time faculty member at Northeastern University, where I teach entrepreneurship and innovation. I'm off from teaching for the summer. I also do a fair amount of writing. I write for CIO. I always want to say CIO magazine, but there's no more magazines. So CEO.com. And I do a lot of work in and around go-to-market strategy and obviously working with Ecumena. And I teach it, I do it, I teach it, I write about it, and I've been doing it a long time. And it's great to be here.
Awesome. You're the second or maybe the third person that teaches and does practices marketing, although you teach entrepreneurship, but they're very closely connected.
They are closely connected. It's a different department, but work with them a lot. Yeah. And I think the other thing, too, the thing that I just neglected to mention as well, because it was part of you and I getting acquainted, is I've also been a CEO 3
Oh,
times.
wow.
So I've run the company as well. And I know a lot of what we wanted to talk about today was the relationship between the CEO and the CMO. And because I've sat in both seats multiple
Yeah.
times throughout my career, happy to give perspective on that, particularly in this age of AI. I wanted to mention that too.
Good. Where were you CEO? Which company was it?
Most recently, I was CEO for a little less than a year, fairly brief, at a AI software company called Squark AI that was acquired last year, I believe, after I left. Prior to that, I was CEO at a fintech company called Dipjar for about 4.5 years. And then
Wow.
earlier in my career, I was founder and CEO of a market research and consulting firm called Reservoir Partners that was acquired by, I don't know if you remember, a firm called Aberdeen Group. And Aberdeen was an
Oh,
industry
yeah, I do
in
remember.
the way back days. They're
Yeah.
actually part of Hart Hanks. My company that was acquired by them is now somewhere within Hart Hanks. Actually, I was an industry analyst early in my career. I was also Yankee Group, which is somewhere inside of Standard & Poor's these days. So
Yeah.
I did a lot of kind of market research industry analyst work in my early days. So I had a company back then as well. And
Cool.
all 3 companies I was CEO of at different points in time. Like I said, Squark after I left, but they all were exited. Although in the case of Dipjar, I actually stuck around for about 2 years, a little over 2 years after the company was acquired. And that was a great run.
Wonderful. Thanks for the intro. I appreciate it. And this would make a really good topic to talk about the relationship between CEOs and CMOs, because I know CMO tenure in many companies tend to be the shortest. And a lot of it there's different reasons for that, but a lot of it has in a B2B space, a lot of it has to do with in a sales versus marketing. I want to call it a battle, although sometimes it's not a battle, it's just a challenge. So I guess let's just go from top to bottom. What is the role of CEO against other C levels like CRO and CMO in general, in particular in such situations where there's a little bit of friction or a lack of alignment?
Yeah. So a couple of ways I would answer that. First of all, and this is obvious because it's what the letters mean, chief executive officer. But I think having been in the seat, you realize that your job is to be the kind of head executor of the business. That doesn't mean you own the business.
Yeah.
Actually, in the first case, Reservoir Partners, I was the owner, but the other 2 cases, there were other investors or the founders. Like I wasn't a founder of the other 2 businesses that I ran more recently, but there were founder owners, there were investors. They own the business. And what that really means is your job is to run the business, but you certainly don't get to make all the decisions about like how you're going to run the business, because obviously the owner of the business, your board,
Yeah.
oftentimes always has a say. So you still work for somebody, you work for the board, but then the other C-level functions generally report to you, including the CMO and the CRO. And when you alluded to friction, I assume that's the kind of friction that you're talking about.
Yeah, I deal with as when I was in house and also now as a contractor, consultant, agency person. I see that happening. I deal with that a lot in a indirect way, where there's always been these talks about marketing versus sales, marketing doing a lot of hard work versus sales, but sales not trusting their leads. And there isn't a definite answer. I think a lot of it has to be driven from the CEO level to make sure that they work together, because both CMOs and head of sales, whatever their title, CRO, whatever, are going to they're going to be in the same, they don't report to each other, they're in the same level.
They're
And
peers,
exactly, that's the word I
right?
was looking for. So how does the CEO handle that? And I think that's really relevant to many B2B environments. B2C is a little bit easier because, especially e-commerce, you have, it's a lot, the friction, the sales cycle is a lot less complicated with some exceptions. But B2B, SaaS, and right now I believe it's a SaaS company that you're
Yeah.
CMO of. That could happen a lot, where you're doing all this good stuff in the marketing, you're driving a lot of relevant leads, but they're not quite the leads that sales want. And then there's lack of trust, and there's a little bit of back and forth depending on the chemistry between sales and marketing. Sometimes they work it out, and sometimes they just need a little bit of help from above, and above in this case means the CEO.
Yeah, it's funny. Early in my career, I don't remember exactly how early, although I remember the person, but I'm not going to name him. I was working for a CEO who maybe in a loose moment, he admitted to me, he said, I kind of like having a little creative tension between marketing and sales. It's actually a good thing, keeps them on their toes, right? Marketing thinks they're never really doing a good enough job. Sales is never hitting the number. They're looking for, they don't want to blame themselves, so they want to blame marketing. But he also said, and I think this is really the important part, the key to it is not letting it get out of hand. And that's the CEO's job, first of all, because honestly, marketing and CRO can't really control that. They can control their own behavior, but they can't
Mhm.
control whether things spiral. And I would say most, not necessarily all, but probably most of the better companies that I've worked with and for over the years, and I'd like to think some of the ones I ran had a fair amount of creative tension, or whatever kind of tension you want to call it, between sales and marketing. But again, not destructive, right? Not finger
Yeah.
pointing, not blaming. Look, at the end of the day, the ultimate accountability is hitting the number, and hitting the number means closing sales, right? So I would also say that generally speaking, and I think this is true. I don't know. I haven't really looked at the statistics on this. It would be a good AI prompt, but the percentage of, like, in my world, particularly like B2B SaaS and payments and fintech, where I've spent pretty much all my career, I would say many more CEOs that I know come from the sales side than the marketing side. I think we probably need more marketers
Yeah.
with CEO gigs. Not necessarily as true on the consumer side. On the consumer side, you get a lot of marketing oriented CEOs. That's not my background, but on the B2B side, a lot of them come from sales. So they tend to understand sales more, which
Sure.
from the CMO's perspective can mean it sounds like they're siding with sales, but
Yes.
it's really, if they're doing a good job, they're not really citing. It's just that's what they better
Yes.
understand. And that's what they're ultimately accountable for. That's what the CEO is accountable to the board and the investors, is hitting the top line and hitting the bottom line as well, managing costs and expense. The CRO is generally strictly top line focused, right? They just have to hit the top line number. And so ultimately that's where the accountability lies. And then marketing is supporting that. And I know a lot of marketers chafe at the idea that they're working for sales or supporting sales. Organizationally, you're a peer, but structurally and functionally, you are. That's exactly what you're doing. You're really supporting sales. If you're not supporting sales, you're really not doing your job in the B2B world. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean you work for them. Sometimes it might feel like you work for them, and that can get frustrating, but you have to support that ultimate accountability that both your peer and your boss are focused on. So I think that's where a lot of it comes from, and that's where a lot of the pressure comes from as well.
Yeah, you pointed out some really good things there. That number one is marketing in the B2B world, at least, is not just about cute ads or whatever. They have to really support sales. And that's something that I've actually had to learn when I was in house at a B2B. It was a fintech company too. I was like more of a senior level marketing director that reported to the CMO. And we realize things that we care about, leads, in vanity metrics such as clicks and rankings and impressions, stuff like that, was just a really metrics for us to optimize the campaigns. They didn't care about any of that. They cared only
Right.
about They don't, and I don't think they care about MQLs. I think that the lowest was like how many opportunities we had. I think that's what we were judged on. And then the CFOs, and since we are talking about other C-levels, CFOs were in the mix too, because CEOs would look at the CFO, and CFO would just be number people, really have a lot of influence about which direction we should go. And then that was a point where I decided that I don't want to be a full-time CMO. I'm like, it feels very like you have to deal with the CRO, you have to deal with it, obviously your boss, CEO, but also CFOs, being number guys or gals, they have a lot of influence in decision making. What are your takes on that? Do you agree with that? Have you seen that at organizations a lot where CFOs are also influencing which direction the company should go? Is it more sales or is it more marketing? Because the marketing budgets tend to really get impacted really quickly when the market isn't good or if your company's sales are down.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And it's interesting because putting my CEO hat back on for a
Mhm.
moment, and again, somebody told me this one time as well, a different person, when I got my first CEO job from outside, not the company I founded. And he said, the CFO is the most important person in your life, going to be aside from your spouse, maybe more than your spouse. He was joking,
Wow.
but because the CFO has to tell you what you don't want to hear. The
Yeah.
CFO has to tell you the truth, and their job is to be the truth teller. And I think one of the ways, like, that for instance, I'm having this conversation just about every day. As a matter of fact, just had it this morning with the CFO at Akumina about the budget. And the best way to approach working with a CFO is with that headset on, that you have to be a truth teller. The nice thing is that CFOs, and I'm not saying the CEO doesn't understand this or CRO, they understand that all these metrics matter, right? The whole demand funnel concept is dependent on top of the funnel leads, or middle of the funnel, and it goes from MQLs to SQLs, and these numbers all matter. But at the same time, they're not going to report them to the board.
Yeah.
And marketers tend to focus on them because that's what tells them if they're doing a good job generally. But the bottom
Mhm.
line, the bottom of the funnel is really all that matters to
Yes.
the ultimate performance of the business that you're going to report out to investors. And the struggle comes in when marketing feels like the numbers look good, but they're the numbers that aren't those bottom of the funnel numbers. So I can show you a lot of MQLs, or I could show you a lot of raw leads that I'm
Mhm.
generating. And that's when those sales is saying that they're not producing any deals, and we don't have enough deals in the pipeline, and we don't have enough of them, or the quality's bad. And that's where all the tension comes in. And that may be right. And sometimes it's not right. Look, there are some good sales leaders and some not so good sales leaders, but all of them look to marketing to feed them leads, right? So you can have a better or worse relationship, but you really can't control that. What you can control is just focusing as much as possible as what I report up and what I
Yeah.
report out really needs to be focused on the end goal and the bottom of the funnel. And that's where I really have to try to build a partnership with the CRO, which isn't always easy. And that's where also the CFO can be your advocate because they understand how all of this stuff flows. So,
Yeah. The
and if you're going
number.
to justify budget to spend on top of the funnel that's going to ultimately drive the bottom of the funnel, then you have to get the budget approved. So you have to be able to have that conversation.
Sure. How much of a if you're we work with a lot of tech and SaaS companies, and I think a lot of their CEOs and they tend to be startups, like founders who became a CEO. And like you said earlier, some of them maybe focus on a certain area that are really good at. And then how much of evangelizing do CMOs have to do? Should they teach other C levels about marketing, like the funnel, like if they don't understand it? Hey, this is what yes, all of us want that lower funnel leads, but in order to get here, we got to do this, and do this, and this is how long it takes. That's something that I think some CMOs don't do, and I
Mm.
don't know if that helps. You've been a CMO, you've been a CEO. Would that help you if a CMO, like assuming, let's say you don't know a lot about marketing, would it help you as a CEO if a CMO kind of goes over some of that stuff with you and have a launch and learn, just typical evangelizing about how this whole marketing journey works, customer journey works?
Yes, it would be helpful, but I think it's important to pick your spots. And also, in many cases, I think the mistake that I've seen made many times, and I've definitely made it myself, hopefully earlier in my career, is that you try to force feed that, right? You're
Yeah.
trying to
I'm
kind
guilty
of
of that too. Yeah.
force it on an audience and it's not that they don't even understand it, but it's not. what they're most concerned about. You're not addressing, and if you're not careful, it can sound like excuse making, or it can sound
Yeah.
like ass covering, and pardon my
Yeah.
French, but and it doesn't really, or some justification. And it's just, they want the
Sure.
truth about what are we doing to generate leads, right? What are we
Yeah.
doing to generate qualified leads, qualified deals, and sales? And so they really just want to stay focused on that other part of the funnel. And so it's not worth it not to, I'm saying not too many times, I think I did a triple negative there, but it's still worth it if the audience is receptive. And certainly if the audience asks for it, yes, do it. But if you try to force it, it can blow up in your face, I guess is what I'm really trying to say.
Got it. Cool. No, this is great. I think we work with established companies, publicly traded, but also a lot of startups. And it's all over the place in terms of the CEOs' knowledge about marketing. Some of them are really understand it. And those are the ones that tend to be a little bit easier to work with. And some of them, they just, they're so high level that they either don't understand it, or maybe they don't represent that they
Hmm.
don't. And they just want certain numbers and metrics. And there's pros and cons with both as well. I think sometimes the one that they think they understand marketing, sometimes they're, as a marketer, sometimes I have my challenges with them too, because I just recently finished, I'm not going to name them because we worked with them so many years, with a SaaS company that provides a really good solution to manufacturing industry. And I was trying to tell their CEO is that, look, I know you're CMO, and I think she has a different title, like head of marketing. It's not really CMO, but that's what she is pushing a lot on LinkedIn or whatever. But you're dealing with manufacturing. I don't think manufacturing people are. I have a LinkedIn profile, but I don't think they're active on LinkedIn, because what? How do I know that? Because I used my very first job when I moved to US was working for a factory, and after that, I did marketing for many factories, even until like even now we have a manufacturing client, from product managers to even marketing people. They're actually the very hand, they're not in their computer on the LinkedIn. It's not like software companies or SaaS companies. They're walking around the factory, they're in all these meetings. So my as a outside vendor, I was trying to tell them, it's like, you got to focus more on SEO, because you have to have a lot on content marketing, because you have to have those in case your customers are searching for it. But then you got to do more like email marketing and trade shows. LinkedIn is not where it's at. And as an outside vendor, sometimes they don't see C-levels are not going to listen to us because they think we probably have a selfish angle here. So that's going to lead me to my next question. How do people like us, fractionals, consultants, agencies, especially if you have to deal with CMOs and CEOs in terms of startups, how do we have a better communication that more persuasive, that is? And I know you're probably going to say data, but I've presented that didn't work. So I think it's more of a EQ thing. Do you have any insights on how we can, as an outsider, influence the C level?
Yeah, yes, I was going to say data, and you already said it.
Yeah.
And I,
It does work. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it
right.
just, it's data. It's about what I've noticed about data is, like, when you present data, they have to understand data. So you have to tell the story, and they may or may not like that story.
Yes, you're doing my part with me. My part for me, I should say. That's exactly what I was going to say. Is it's the story that you can use to support with data, and the story that data tells, and it's the narrative you put around the data. I, I think, though, it also comes down to, again, truth telling, because one thing about marketers, and I'm certainly not just referring to you, but it's just marketers, if anything, I can refer to myself a bit, but marketers in general, putting all that aside, marketers tend to be storytellers, right?
Yeah,
And they tend to be good at spinning narratives and positioning and messaging. And the keyword that I just said in there, though, is spin. And so if it comes off as spin, the problem is that, particularly now in B2B SaaS, there is so much pressure, right?
sure.
There is a period, and I talk a lot. I'm going to go aside for a minute, but then I'll loop back. Back in the early 2000s, in the 21, 22, even late 2020, obviously we were dealing with the pandemic.
Mhm.
There was this other thing going on at the same time that people sometimes refer to as ZIRP, zero interest rate policy, when, when interest rates got very low, and then there were all these programs where there was all this government money coming out. And there were all these customers that needed to buy new stuff because their systems that they were using to go find customers, all of a sudden they were dealing with at home work environments, hybrid environments, their old systems didn't work. So they're investing in all this new technology. So there was this period where everybody was doing well and making a lot of money, but people got in their heads like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. And then all of a sudden, like interest rates started going up, people started
Hmm.
going back to the office, the world started getting back to normal, and a lot of that stuff stopped working. And but yet people's narratives of what worked, they were reluctant to let go of them. So now we're back to a, I wouldn't say it's the same as the pre-COVID world, but it looks a lot more like the pre-COVID world than it did
Yeah,
2, 3 years ago. But like companies haven't adapted their strategy and tactics, and there are way too many vendors out there.
yeah,
So the B2B SaaS companies are all under tons of pressure. Where I was going with that, bringing it back to the original title, everybody's under a lot of pressure right now. There's too much
yeah,
competition, there's too few customers. Going back to the CFOs on the buyer side, whether they're manufacturing companies, as you were talking about, or other tech companies, they're all saying, no, we have 10 SaaS vendors supporting our go to market efforts. Pick the two you want to keep, and we're getting rid of the other eight.
yeah,
And so there's a lot of like consolidation pressure coming from the buy side. So in an environment like that, they just want to hear, like, how are you helping me drive? Don't give me spin. Don't give me a story. Show me how we're going to make the number. And by the way, tell me the truth. If something's not working, let's stop doing it. Let's shut it down. That's an area where also, I think a lot of marketers, and I wouldn't include myself in this category, but I've seen this movie very often. They're reluctant to say something's not working because they either think they're going to get fired, or they think they're going to lose their budgets, or they think they're going to somehow otherwise be negatively affected. But they may know a lot of the stuff is not working and they just want to stop
yeah,
doing it. And, or they don't want to stop doing it because they're afraid of what happens. They don't even want to tell the truth. But again, the CFO and the CEO, they're seeing the numbers. They're seeing, and the only numbers they may be seeing are we're spending a lot of money and we're not getting the deals. And in that case, you can talk all you want about MQLs and SQLs in the funnel and
yeah.
tell all the stories you want. But if there a lot of money is being spent and few results are being produced, it's time to get to the truth telling about maybe what, and spend more time on what isn't working rather than what is. Right. So I think
Yeah.
there's a credibility factor because CMOs have a tendency to always want to spin things positively because that's what you're doing to the outside world, but you can't do that internally, I guess is what I'm saying.
Sure. And it's really, these are really good insights you're providing because it helps me as a marketer to better understand the challenges, the pushbacks, and same do with the CMOs. And if you're getting a pushback, why is that? Just one thing you mentioned that it reminded me of the Peloton story where COVID happened. Everybody was jumping on Peloton and their stocks went off the roof. And it happened with many other companies as well. And then now things are opening up. They seem not to be the case. I heard they were struggling, and it's a great product, right? But people are going out again, and there was this push for digital because of COVID that's going
Right.
away. And I just came back from a client meeting, and then next week I'm going to a trade show. There's this going back to the trade show world. Trade shows are coming back, conferences are coming back, and people want to get out of office, especially if you work from home. And so spending so much money in digital ads may not necessarily be the right way anymore. And now
Right.
with what you mentioned, the interest rates, and then now the market conditions being unstable, if you're being impacted, and we have a manufacturing client that put things on pause because of tariffs. So they just said, okay, we're gonna have to put this on pause until we figure out what
Mhm.
we're gonna do. And usually marketing is the first one to give when that stuff like that happens. Is any sort of uncertainty, whether it's more from markets or internally, usually the marketing numbers are cut back. And you pointed out that I've actually felt it myself as a marketing. Sometimes they get nervous, they don't want to lose their job or the budget, and sometimes they just don't tell you the whole story. What I take from it as a marketer is that we have to be honest to ourselves and our peers and our and superiors about the state of union with marketing in our companies.
But
Yeah,
what isn't working. And then also to connect that to AI, what can be done in a different way now as
yeah,
well, because this is where things come in from, like, I have been saying for quite some time now, and I don't say this to, believe me, I'm a content marketer, but there's
mhm,
probably no career path that is more threatened by AI than content marketing
sure,
because AI can create content. I've written about this quite recently. Actually, I was even writing on Substack about this very topic. And what's happening out there, there's I don't know if SaaStr, which is a web, not a website, it's a conference company, but they also do a lot of content that
Mhm.
serves the B2B SaaS community. And a guy named Jason Lemkin who runs it, I remember he posted something on LinkedIn, and I'm paraphrasing it, I have to go find it, but he was talking about basically he took his content marketing team from 5 people to one person
Yeah,
this year, and he's getting just as much out of them. And if you look at what the CEO of Shopify is telling his team, and honestly, it's what I first thing I did when I came into Acumatica
yeah,
was we were spending a lot of money on agencies, and a good agency doing generally good work, but doing it in a very people centric way.
yeah,
And it's just, I'm not saying you just want to say, hey, ChatGPT, write all my blog posts, but the world is definitely changing. You have to be ready to change with that. And there is an opportunity to substantially trim spend on headcount, spend on people, spend on hours. I think agencies who charge on a per hour basis, you really have to look very hard at that, right? Because
yeah,
it's really about the value that you deliver. It's not how many hours you spend. And I think the
yeah,
marketing world, both inside companies and outside with service providers, agencies, and such, is really struggling with that and going to continue to struggle with that. But that's an
yeah.
adaptation that absolutely has to happen because that is very top of mind right now for CEOs and CFOs.
No, I'm glad you
Is
brought it up because AI is next thing I was going to ask you about, and you brought it up. We actually felt that I'm more of a. I don't consider us to be that typical agency that you just mentioned. We're more of a like a team of experts that come together and help you.
Mhm.
And I try to when I did my agency, I started as a consultant, and then I brought in the people I knew and I trusted. I knew they were doing really well, and we felt that too. It felt like, and I actually like it as an agency owner. I like to have to deal with less people than
Mhm.
more people. So like we used to have a lot of writers, and now we have one writer who basically essentially he's an editor rather than writer. We have a lot of custom gems. We use Gemini and ChatGPT, and we use tools as well. That essentially he's switched over from writing stuff from scratch to editing them, so they're humanizing and making sure that the content is according to the content guideline or tone of voice and stuff like that. And same thing with design. I literally, while I was in the airport, I came up with. I use an AI tool called Gamma, which make presentations, but you can also create landing pages in. And I was instead of going through the whole wireframe thing, I just wanted to create a wireframe to pass my designer so she can
Mhm.
design a landing page for us. And this thing literally created a whole page for me. And the only thing my designer has to do is now make sure the colors or whatever according to our website color palettes and
Yep.
branding guideline. So we're embracing it. It is definitely changing jobs, but I think it's happening in a good way because I think marketing was just too labor intensive at times in EU. And you're 100% right. We are rethinking our strategy. We're going more toward retainers like rather than hourly because the hourly stuff just doesn't make sense because you're going to use a tool, right? So it's about the value you add.
Mhm.
Obviously, I have to pay my team hourly if they're part time, but then that's for me to figure out how I'm going to do that. So, since you brought up AI, and I think we have another 4 minutes, how do C level keep up with AI? Do they rely on their team to tell? Because there's a lot of solutions out there, and from marketing to sales, every day I'm getting retargeted a bunch of AI tools. Some of them are like noise, some of them are really good tools. I've also seen enterprise softwares are coming up with their own AI features. Like Salesforce came with some agentic AI stuff, but they're focusing more on sales or SEMrush or SEMrush for the tool we use for SEO and SEM is coming up with a lot of AI features. It's really noisy out there. Obviously, it's for us technicians and practitioners to figure that out. But C level, how much AI should they familiar themselves with and adopt? What are your take? What do you have any feedback
Yeah.
on that?
And look, I think they have to get hands on, and I think they are. Again, I work in tech and software, so certainly you don't see many non tech savvy, even CEOs in the industry that I'm in. But
Yeah,
I think it's incumbent on them. And also, they're getting pressure from their boards and they're getting pressure from their investors to find more creative ways to do things. Like I said,
sure.
Toby at Shopify, the thing that he just announced the other day, that's going on all over the place. So figure out a way to use AI to do this. Yes, they're asking their teams to look into it, but yes, they're also experimenting themselves. You're not going to find too many CEOs these days who've never played with the chat GPT or something similar.
Yeah.
I tend to work a lot with Claude in particular. I
Hmm.
mentioned I teach at Northeastern. Northeastern has done a deal with Anthropic. So I'm in the Claude world very often, although we do use ChatGPT at Acumatica. And actually, we just announced our AI powered capabilities that are rolling out over the next year at Acumatica this week, and 3 days past the launch of that. So I can relate completely. I do think that a lot of it is going to be focused on, and it needs to be focused on what you can do with AI,
Hmm.
not what which LLM you pick or understanding RAG or all of these technical terms. Business people don't need to know that. They need to know how I can use this effectively to get more done, increase productivity, reduce costs,
Yeah.
and obviously, as you said, do a better job of kind of reaching out to customers and growing business. So it's around the use of AI. It's not around the technical details of AI. That's really where the value is being gained.
Chris, I didn't think we are gonna be able to get through the. I thought talking about just sea level. I was like, I'm gonna run out of top things to talk about, but we're talking a lot, and we can keep going. But I know we are running shorter in time, and maybe you should have you again in future. But before we end this, couple of questions. Where can people find you? And then I like to ask a couple of personal questions.
Sure. Yeah. I guess the best place to find me is on LinkedIn, and you can look me up by name there. Also at acumatica.com, although we're redoing the website right now. So that's a project that we're in the midst of. So there's some movement going on there. And then, of course, because I'm faculty at Northeastern, you can find me there as well. So I'm pretty easy to find. Google me, particularly because I used to be an industry analyst. So my name's out there. I'm not too hard to look up.
Very cool. I was just listening to Google I/O that just happened, and this AI is changing a lot of the Google is changing. They're gonna roll out AI mode search for everyone in the US. Even they're gonna have even the ads or the way you bid on ads, and that is gonna change. You're gonna have an agent that's gonna create an ad for you. So here goes a lot of media buyers, right? So we gotta get ready for that. So now let me get down to the personal questions. What do you like to do when you're not teaching or marketing or being an awesome professional?
Yeah, first of all, I like what I do. So I
Yeah.
do probably spend an inordinate amount of time doing that. I'm loving the teaching. I just started doing that about a year ago. It's one of these things I kind of wish I had done earlier in my career, but I'm really enjoying it now. I love working with the students. I'm itching to get back in the classroom. But beside that, I'll tell you, we adopted a puppy, and he's a big
Mm.
puppy about 3 months ago. So I
Oh
spent a
wow.
lot of time out with my dog and listening to podcasts while I'm walking the dog, and I get the headphones so you can still hear what's going on around you. I spend a lot of time reading. I'm a skier. We're obviously past the end of the season
Yeah.
now. I do live near the beach. I'm not a big beach person, but
Yeah.
I'm also big into soccer. I don't really play anymore. I
Yeah.
still fool around, but I am a big Arsenal fan. I'm always
Oh
watching
my God, I
watching
do.
them.
We talked about that, didn't we? Because
I think we talked about it the
I'm
first
an
time.
Arsenal fan too. I was like, wow. Yeah, I'm like, they don't win anything, but I like watching them play.
They're gonna win. They're gonna
They're
win. This
gonna win.
was
They
this was
got
a
really
tough
close
year.
this year in the Champions League, but
This
in
was a tough
EPL,
year
not.
with the injuries and
Hmm.
everything and fighting through, and I still have a lot of respect for what they did. But I love the way the team is structured and the way they're set up. So, and I just love the game too. So I am, even though I grew up in the U.S., when I was a kid, not too many kids were playing soccer, and I was probably one of the few. Now it's become very popular in the U.S., although we have a lot of alternatives here as well. But obviously,
Yeah.
worldwide, it is the game, and it really is the beautiful game. So
It
I
is
love
a
watching
it
it,
is a beautiful game,
particularly.
and you appreciate it when you two things happen. When you have played it and you know
Hmm.
how hard it actually is to get that ball. People like that goal is huge. I'm like, okay, I want you to get that ball into that goal past 11 people and the goalkeeper that can grab it with their hand. Like you have to have skills, you have to have fitness, and you have to know what you're doing. And also, it's also beautiful. It gets more interesting if you pick a team. If you just watch two teams that you don't care about, so
Hmm.
obviously it's a low scoring game, so it's going to be boring. So the another question I'd like to ask is that if you could be a superhero, which superhero would you be? And this is just a really random question I ask because it will tell you a little bit about your personality. And I'm going to volunteer. I'll be a Sith Lord slash Jedi because there are times where I just lose it and I want to become all Sith and just destroy
Hmm.
everything. And then I'm also a good guy at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
it's Darth
Well,
Vader.
you didn't prep me with these questions first of all, so I definitely have to
Y-
think about this one. I will tell you, there's two answers, and I don't know which one I'd put up top, but I'll start with the one I probably put up top, and then the second one. But they were both influenced by the media in which they appeared. I remember when I was not so much a young kid, but more in my like teenage years, there was the Dark Knight comics, which
Mhm.
was not the old style comic books,
Oh,
but
okay.
they were almost books. I think it was a guy named Frank Miller who wrote the Sin City, but
Mm,
it was a very dark view on Batman and the
yeah.
whole backstory of Batman. And if you remember some of the Batman movies like
Mhm,
Dark Knight Rises, when he's in the jail, with a
sure.
very kind of dark, bleak. And I remember being completely enraptured by these kind of dark comics. And so
Hmm.
I've always had a real admiration for Batman, not because he's a Batman, and certainly not because of the old TV shows, cheesy TV show when I was a little kid, although that was kind of fun, but
Yeah.
because of those comics. So I've always had a thing for Batman is cool. But also, I'm a big Robert Downey Jr. fan. I think he did such a great job with the not Spider-Man, Iron Man character
Iron Man.
during
Yeah.
the MCU
Hmm.
movies. Although it's ironic too, because I'm Scandinavian heritage, I should probably gravitate more toward Thor because Chris Hemsworth did a great job with the
Sure.
character. But some of the actors who did a really great job, the early MCU movies were fantastic. I think the series has tailed off a bit in quality, but I've always kind of liked Iron Man. I've always liked Thor. So I guess it's a non-answer, but I
No,
guess
I mean
I'd
that
probably
was
put
great.
Batman at the
That was
top and Iron
great.
Man as well, but all influenced by the media. So
That
not,
was great.
for
Yeah.
any other affinity. Yep.
And by the way, I didn't prep you for this
No,
on purpose. On
we
purpose.
did talk about Arsenal.
Yeah, we did talk
So
about Arsenal, but this was a surprise because I like to surprise people with this question.
yeah,
It's been
yes,
a
you help
pleasure.
people think
Thank
on
you
their
so
feet.
much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And I love to have you again. Maybe talk more specifically about AI at the C level because I think I talk to a lot of CMOs and I think they need to know that AI isn't just chat GPT. There's agentic
Hmm.
AI, there's a bunch of stuff happening. Lots of jobs are going to go away and or they have to transform. Even like CPAs, I don't know if you need like a traditional CPA anymore, like not CPA, like a bookkeeper anymore. And so you have to be able to adapt. So I would love to have you on again in the near future, but I
Yeah.
know you're busy. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming. Do you have any questions? Do you have anything else you'd like to add before we go away?
No, I think that things are moving very fast in the AI space, and probably by the next time we talk, it'll be different than what we would have talked about today
For
anyway. I
sure.
will tell you one story in closing.
Please.
Again, going back to my teaching, when I first started teaching again, it was just over a year ago. There's massive debates online and on LinkedIn and elsewhere, academic, about use of AI and whether students should be able to use AI and whether faculty should be able to use AI. And I'm a big advocate of proper use of AI, but obviously it can be used for cheating, right? And I remember even when I started a year ago, I think I was pretty good at being able to tell when a student used AI for their assignment. I can't tell anymore, and they have all these tools that supposedly tell you, but they are completely unreliable. So my point in all that is it has just moved so fast. First of all, anybody who's saying you can't use it, you need to ban it, they're dreaming. It's never going to
Sure.
happen. And the same thing's true in business, obviously, which is more what we're talking about. But it just shows how fast things are going because
Yeah.
not even a year ago, I thought I could tell. And now it's like I gave up. And there are
Yeah.
tools that supposedly will help you tell. You can't give up about them. You can't even rely on them anymore. So it's completely changing the classroom environment and it's completely changing the business environment. And by the time we talk next, I'm sure it'll have changed some more. So yeah, let's do that. I would love to.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate your
All right,
time. You
Al.
have yourself a great weekend. Talk to you later.
You too.
Bye
Take care.
bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.